Let's talk now about winners and losers. Losers, well, almost anyone who bought a house in the last 5 years, the millions of Americans whose retirement savings were wiped clean, those who lost their jobs or their companies or their homes, and the list goes on. And as it turns out in this report, there's evidence of at least one winner, that in fact Goldman Sachs was an even bigger winner than we thought. They received $2.9 billion from the American International Group, or AIG, as payout on a trade it made after AIG was bailed out by taxpayers. But details. What does this all mean? To answer this, we go to Westport, Connecticut, and talk to Peter Schiff, president of Euro Pacific Capital. Peter, I guess I want to get your analysis of these findings. Was it anything new, and what will actually be done? Who will be held accountable?
Well, first of all, they didn't find out anything. The whole commission was a sham from day one. They said that they were looking to find the cause of the financial crisis. Well, they didn't have to look very far. They could have went on Amazon and bought a copy of my book, Crash Proof, that I wrote in 2006 predicting the crisis. They would have known exactly why it happened. They could have just read some of the articles on my website. They could have watched my YouTube presentation on my mortgage banker's speech that I gave in 2006. They would have known exactly why we had a financial crisis. But they weren't looking for the truth. They were looking for an excuse. They wanted to justify their preconceived conclusion. So they put together a bunch of phony witnesses to create the pretense that they were actually doing something. And they wasted another 9 or 10 million taxpayer dollars to put this thing together. And all it was designed to do, and this is what I said they were going to do before they launched the commission, was they validated the government lie that the financial crisis and the housing bubble were the result of a lack of regulatory oversight. And the solution is bigger government, more regulators, more rules, more regulations, when it was government rules and regulations that created the problem.
I want to switch gears to the financial crisis on a global scale. Japan seems to be getting kicked while it's already down. Their outlook changed from stable to negative, their credit rating lowered. How big of a deal is this, and to what extent should Americans be paying close attention to what happens there?
Well, first of all, I think it makes no sense for Japan, and China for that matter, to have a lower credit rating than the United States. After all, we owe those countries a fortune. We owe Japan $1 trillion. We owe China more than $1 trillion. So if you think Japan is going to default, they can't default until we default first. Because before Japan defaults, they're going to cash in the $1 trillion that we owe them. So I think S&P really needs to be downgrading U.S. sovereign debt, not just Japan. But the root cause of these global financial problems is the U.S. It's the U.S. dollar-based reserve system. Because we are debasing our currency, because we're printing so many dollars, because we have interest rates so low, we're forcing all of the other world central banks to be as reckless as we are. And so we are exporting our bad monetary policy and our inflation all around the globe. And this is the root cause of the global imbalances. The world needs to be on a gold standard, not a dollar standard.
Well, Peter, why does this happen, though? Why would Japan have their credit rating lowered when ours is not? Why hasn't the U.S. gotten that punishment first?
Well, remember, this is S&P. This is they didn't get the problems right at subprime. They had collateralized debt obligations with investment grades, high grades, that went to zero. And it should have been obvious to them, just like it was obvious to me. Again, if you watch my mortgage banker's speech on YouTube, just type in Peter Schiff Mortgage Bankers, I identified in 2006 that bonds that they were putting AAA were going to go to zero, and that's exactly what they did. So S&P, they don't have a good track record. They can't see things for the way they're going to be. They're just looking at the way things are, and they can't figure out the natural progression of events.
Back here in the U.S., a hot topic of conversation today, Social Security, the weak economy affecting its lifeline, and some are now estimating the entire Social Security fund will be drained by 2037. What's going on here?
Well, first of all, there is no Social Security fund. That's a myth. What's in there are government's own IOUs. It's like writing yourself a check for $1 million and then claiming you have a fund because you have your own check for $1 million. It's no good. If the government wants to tap into the so-called Social Security funds, it has to sell government bonds into the marketplace. Well, that's exactly what it would do if it had no fund. You see, if Social Security invested the money in foreign government bonds, let's say if they owned German government bonds or Canadian government bonds, then it would be a real fund. But since it invests in its own debt, it's an IOU to itself, so there is nothing there.
But Peter, what about, I mean, I did the math and I figured out that 2037 is just a little bit before I turn 65, although the retirement age by then might be 85. Anyhow, what about all this money that I'm paying into Social Security? Where is all that going?
It's going to pay current beneficiaries. It's, you know, it's a Ponzi scheme. Just like, where did the money go? How did Bernie Madoff's victims get their money? Well, it came from new investors. So your money is going to keep the current retirees whole. But there is no money for you. There's no money for me. The money that we're paying isn't going into anything. It's going out the minute it comes in. The government puts a phony IOU into this make-believe trust fund, but long before that date comes, you're going to have the whole system collapse, because already Social Security is paying out more than it collects. And in the next few years, that gap is going to widen tremendously, and the whole thing is going to fall apart. And ultimately, of course, what's going to happen probably is the government's going to print a bunch of money, and it's not going to matter if you get a Social Security check in the mail, because you're not going to be able to buy anything with it.
Certainly, so many different topics, the financial crisis, Japan, Social Security, so many things, but in some ways they are so connected. Peter Schiff, president of Euro Pacific Capital.